Thank you, Stephanie, for joining today on the Dyslexic Maverick podcast. How are you doing?
I'm good. I am a recently new mom, so a little bit sleep deprived. So word finding might be a little bit hard today. So sorry in advance.
Totally get it. Totally get it. So one thing I always love to know about people I'm talking to is, what are you drinking anything right now? Like, I have like multiple drinks.
Multiple. I've got my emotional support water bottle, caffeine in case I really need it. Usually there's a fun drink for like taste wise, but it was kind of a rush up to the office to make sure I didn't miss the podcast.
I love it. What's your fun drink of choice if you had to pick one?
It has to change. The ADHD, we got to find new dopamine because otherwise we get bored of it. So if you look into my fridge, I would say a good quarter of it is just different poppy drinks, different type of ice waters, flavors, whatever I'm feeling kind of at the moment. Yeah.
I don't know if our family could survive without Poppy at this point in our lives.
Exactly. Whenever there's a new flavor, I'm just like, all right, I'm going to hoard you now. And then I'll get over you as soon as the new flavor comes out. It's fine.
And I heard on social media that you recently broke your toe.
Oh, no, that was last year.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, I reposted it because I was too lazy to make a new video.
So your toe is much better at this point.
Yeah, it's been a year. Great. Well, last year it was not so great.
I was
Yeah.
thinking about that, like, as a new mom, breaking her toe, and I'm, like, putting all of this, like, sequence into, like, action in my head. I'm creating this visual image, thinking like, "Oh my gosh, this poor lady, this has gotta be awful."
Yeah, luckily no. All toes are working right now. It did take a couple months to recover last time, but it's nothing like an ice bath couldn't fix, so it was good.
Well, I do love your videos, especially on TikTok. They always lighten up my feed, which is amazing.
Good.
Um, so Stephanie, you are an occupational
Mhm.
therapist certified in autism spectrum disorder and sensory processing. And also, I think the most exciting for me personally is that you're a co-founder in Diverge Community Services.
Mhm.
And so I've been following you in your journey, and we've kind of gone along this path, relatively same time.
Yeah.
I think it would be fun just to so this was over a year ago that we, I think, connected.
Mhm.
And we were talking, and I think I even threw out the idea, and I was like, "Hey, somebody should do a podcast with neurodivergent voices."
Yeah.
And you and your co-founder, Rachel, literally were, like, on it, and I feel like less than 48 hours. You guys were just like, you took the ball, which I was so excited for.
I think that was just over a year ago, and it's been great. I if you go onto neurodivergent and voices, kind of the intro we say we'll post whenever, and honestly, that's been such a godsend to say that, just because it shows like true neurodivergence and doesn't put the pressure on us, but also doesn't put the pressure on others to make sure that we're constantly posting, and it shows others that you can use your spoons and use your energy levels that you need to when you need to.
Honestly, there's an element of surprise of when you post, you're
Yeah.
like, "Ooh, this is exciting." Like, it's a new one.
Mhm.
And it's not like, "Oh, there isn't one for a week," just like you're saying, but, like, the ADHD brain loves those surprises.
Yeah.
So that's awesome.
Mhm.
Um, so as I understand it, it takes 6 to 7 years of college to become an occupational
Yeah.
therapist. Is that correct?
Yeah. It's your bachelor's and your master's, mostly master's, and you can get your doctorate if you want. But yeah, at least a minimum of 6 years.
Okay. So at what point in the process did you decide to even focus on neurodivergent individuals?
Um, I don't know if I had a specific time frame. I honestly have always wanted to work with individuals that just think differently or process stuff differently. Whether or not I associated that with neurodivergence didn't really, I don't think that aha came till much later, when basically just before we were starting Diverge Community Services. But I've always, since I was a kid, wanted to be a OT and wanted to work with individuals that have autism or that have CP, something that makes their brain just slightly different. So that has always been there. But whether or not I knew what to call it until a couple of years ago is a different story.
Yeah, so I would love to dig into that. So how did this all come about? Like how did you figure it all out?
I guess I grew up going to PT and OT and speech appointments with my sister. She has cerebral palsy and is also autistic. So, and we also has seizures and stuff. So, kind of always grew up in the medical field and seeing therapists that were just there and wanting to do the things that she wanted to do. You know, she wanted to play baseball, she wanted to do these things. And it wasn't ever talking about deficits of hers. It was always, okay, we're going to adapt the bat, or we're going to adapt how this is going to work so that you can do the things that you want to do, so that you can go to these games, that you can participate in however you want to do. And so growing up, I've always seen these therapists do these things and wanted to kind of be a part of it. You know, I wanted to be the person to kind of problem solve, be like, all right, we're not going to kind of work on like specific muscle movements, but maybe the bat just has to be shaped a little different so your hand can grasp it, or a little bit lighter, and then you can be able to do the things that you want to do. So yeah, I think it just kind of stemmed from really early on, where I was like, yeah, I kind of want to do this problem solving and help people do the things that they want to do.
Yeah, that's amazing. And such a like a need that you had such a like strong emotional tie to as well.
Yeah,
Is your sister younger or older than
she's
you?
younger by 2 years. So literally grew up into the clinics, you know. I think she started going, we'll say when she was 2 or 3. So I'm 5 years old, kind of going to these clinics and seeing these things happen. So literally, you know, in the clinics, in the sessions with her, seeing these therapists do awesome work. And I just, since 5, was like, yeah, I want to do stuff like that.
That's amazing. I love that story. Could you tell us a little bit about what does an occupational therapist?
Yeah, everyone's like, do we work on jobs? Like, is it your occupation? Is that all it is? But it's whatever occupies your time, which is a huge, broad thing. So it could be your activities of daily living, like brushing your teeth, remembering to take your medicine. It could be going to your job. It could also be doing the things that you want to do, like gardening or being a parent, stuff like that. So anything that is going to engage in some type of effort and time is what we work on in occupational therapy. If it occupies your time, we'll work on it in occupational therapy.
Interesting. And I guess it makes sense when you say it like that,
Mhm.
but I wouldn't have correlated
Yeah,
anything that occupies your time to occupational therapist.
yeah. It's not a great name for a profession because it definitely makes it seem like it's something else. So if we could rebrand it, you know, the OT world, that'd be nice.
I feel like I could say that about a lot of things in
Yeah,
the neurodivergent world as well.
yeah. Just like let's do a little bit of rebranding and it'll be great.
Exactly, exactly. No, that's amazing. So, I know that you specialize in autism spectrum disorder and sensory processing. What do each of those look like from an occupational therapist point of view?
So for me, it's funny because I have like these certifications and specialties, but truthfully, it's just like a piece of paper. I think the person that's most experienced is the lived individual. So it just looks nice on the end of a email, frankly. I think the person that's experiencing their life is going to have the most input because each neurodivergent individual is going to experience the world differently, whether or not whatever diagnosis you have. But in terms of autism spectrum disorder and sensory processing, I kind of look at what the environment is doing to help an individual do the things that they need to do or want to do, and modify the environment to be able to have them be able to do those things, or be able to modify their way of setting up the task to be able to do those things. Like if you don't have enough energy to do the things you need to and want to do, you're not going to be able to. Or if you're overstimulated, you're not going to be able to do the things you need to do and want to do. So it's kind of fine tuning, figuring out what routines or what environmental modifications that we can do. So yeah, it's just kind of working specifically with the individual on that.
Yeah, and I'm picturing you actually, like, in the house or in the workplace or wherever those situations are happening. Is that the case?
Yeah. No, it can be. It also, I do a lot of telehealth. So it's a lot of kind of just thinking about the day. Because at the end of the day, my goal as a therapist is to not be needed anymore. My goal, my job is to have no job, right? That's at the end of the day, that's my goal. So if an individual can think like an occupational therapist, where they're like, oh, I now know the tools and strategies on how to kind of adapt as needed so that I can do the things I need to do and want to do, then it's all good, which is nice for me to be in the home and in the environment at the beginning, but it's not necessarily needed. Sometimes someone just needs to talk through it so that they can process it on their own so they can use that processing later on.
Telehealth is such a great I think that there are some great things that came out of COVID, and I think pushing telehealth to, like, the top of everyone needs these services, and they're not usually around the people that need them the most.
Yeah, I mean, we're licensed in a bunch of different states because there's a need for it and people aren't getting served. And people, some of my clients are in rural areas or they're in states where legislation is a little bit tricky, so having the therapists that are on the ground in those states, like, they have different laws versus someone that is just licensed in it and residential somewhere else. So it's a little bit different, and having that telehealth is really nice because you can be wherever the person is no matter what.
And I have to believe it breaks down some of the barriers for people to have somebody come into the house, which is sometimes a security thing that they don't maybe wanna go to, but also just, like, the comfort of them being in their home, obviously the comfort of you being in your home or office. It kind of breaks down ththose barriers a little bit quicker.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There's sometimes we have to go into the home to help, like, set up their telehealth space because sometimes that alone is a barrier. How do I get onto a client portal? How do I, like, work a Zoom thing? So sometimes it's us initially going into the home, setting it up so that they can access those tools and stuff later. But truthfully, most of our clients have a nice ease and prefer telehealth because of the things that you mentioned. It's in their own home, they're nice and secure, they're comfortable versus going out into a clinic setting that's usually, like, cold and you ruins your whole routine of the day because it's you got to drive there, drive back, all that stuff.
No, it's wonderful. So you are a co-founder of Diverge Community Services. Can you talk a little bit about your focus with Diverge
Yeah.
specifically?
So Rachel, the other co-founder, and I made and created Diverge so that it focused on neurodivergent adults specifically. That is our sole focus, is to meet the unmet needs of the adult neurodivergent community. Because as parents, and a pediatric therapist myself, we always see kids getting services and kids getting a lot of resources and all this, and then immediately drops off after high school, where you have, a team, literally a speech pathologist, a social worker, there's teachers, there's everyone that's in your corner to try to figure out how to get the things that you need. And then as soon as you graduate, they're gone. So our goal is to kind of make sure that, for adulting, that you can be able to pay your bills, that you're able to do the things that you want to do for the rest of your life, because your life doesn't end at 18 or 21 or 26, wherever your services end in your area.
I was just having this conversation this morning with another professional in this similar space,
Mhm.
and I said, I'm like, "Our brains don't change at 18 or 21 or
Right?
26, so why would we think that we don't need any other supports?" And quite honestly, it's almost a more challenging time, like,
Yeah.
those years are hard,
Yeah.
and you're doing things that you've never done before, and you're out on your own, and so it's almost like you need more services during those transition years,
Yeah.
and yet they're just left to their own. I don't and yeah, it's sad when you start to think about how many and with the rates that are increasing on some of these neurodivergent conditions, it could be a real challenge going forward
Yeah.
for the amount of people that are going to need services.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you don't never learn how to pay taxes or how to talk to your landlord, that the pipes are leaking and stuff, all those things you don't get taught in high school or in grade school, and you have someone else to kind of advocate for you. Why does that make it now that you're expected to do all these big executive functioning brain things when there's so much going on in life? Not only are you working, but you're doing all this other tasks, being a parent, just trying to live and survive, cook for yourself and others. It's just complicated why we think that our brains change at a certain age and then services just dip. I don't understand.
I completely agree. When I think of my children and their 504 plans and all of the support that they're getting,
Mhm.
how does that and maybe at some point, maybe we can change the world. But maybe that could transition. I know it somewhat transitions to college,
Mhm.
but to transition to the work world too and say like, "Hey, here's kind of how it looks in the work world," and be able to move that needle in that way too, which is exactly what you all are doing.
I would love for it to be on a bigger scale. We're constantly looking at like the different therapists in different states to even just recommend because the need is there. We have referrals and wait lists from all different parts of the country because there's a need for it. So if people know the need, let us know because we want to get services to them. And if they have a therapist that they know is neurodivergent affirming and any good resources, I think it's good to just spread the word, period, of these services that can meet the needs of adults.
I agree. The one thing that I just absolutely love, most people could call us competitors, right? Like we work in the same state. We're 60-ish miles apart from each other.
Yeah,
Or we work in different states, but
States, yeah.
60 miles apart. I mean, coaching doesn't really have the same
Mhm.
limitations that you do as medical professionals, um but I think this community is so wonderful because we're all cheering each other on and supporting each other and helping, and there's so much work to be done
Yeah,
that we're like, "Come help us.
there,
Just come on."
there's not enough people to help out. So, like, I don't care who is helping as long as someone's being helped. That's all I care about. Go to whoever you need to go to as long as it's with good intentions and ethically done. You're not trying to do harm, then it's good. You just get the help that you need. So, I will refer to whoever is the closest person to you or who I think the best fit is for you, that kind of thing.
I love that. And that I know you were working in the hospital in the pediatric section for a while. Are you still doing that
Yeah,
as well?
I still do that full time, reduced hours. I do 311, so long days those times for the outpatient pediatrics. But I like the consistent paycheck, in a new upcoming not profession, a new upcoming business. Stuff is not consistent, as you are well aware, and other entrepreneurs are well aware. So for financial security reasons, I have it. Plus, it's really hard to stay away from the kids that you're there seeing every day, like 3 times a week sometimes, and you become part of their families. Like you get their Christmas cards and all that. So yeah, can't turn my kiddos away completely.
It kinda reminds me of how our tutoring supports in our family are very much a part of our family. They come to the kids' birthday parties, and if they're at least within driving distance, and it sounds like it's the same, which is just again, I think you can just tell your heart from this is obviously your profession, and you care about it on a professional level, but you just care so deeply about each and every single one of your clients that I just love seeing that.
Yeah.
So, you also are neurodivergent.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about your brain?
hmm I have dyslexia, ADHD, chronic migraines, anxiety, all that good jazz. So growing up, always knew I had dyslexia and ADHD. It was kind of pretty well known, at kindergarten level when you're still not understanding the alphabet really well. It's a big red flag, like, oh, this girl is not reading. She's not understanding any of the letters and whatnot. So this was kind of a profession that not only I saw others being helped with, but also kind of myself knowing that, hey, I need help in a different way to make my brain be able to do the things that I need to do, and it doesn't make me lesser of a person. I just needed the environment and how I'm taught a little bit differently, but otherwise I'll still rock your socks off in other areas.
I love the way you say that. I'll rock your socks off. I love it. So you are one of the, I would say, more few as far as like diagnosed early. A lot of people get diagnosed with dyslexia later, um, or not, maybe not even formally at all. With the statistics, it's pretty low of formal diagnoses. So you grew up knowing you were dyslexic. How do you think that that changed your perspective?
um, I think I technically got my formal diagnosis like in third grade or something, but it was enough where I was getting 504s like at kindergarten, enough where people knew that there was something going on. And luckily, I had really supportive parents that are open to say like, hey, your brain just works a little bit differently and that's fine. And because I knew that my brain worked differently, I think I was able to advocate for myself way easier growing up than not. If a teacher would call on me to read a sentence, I would like remind them later like, hey, do you mind like giving me a couple minutes like forewarning and I can read it in a minute or two because I'm going to secretly read it to myself a couple times to practice it out loud. Or, can I write it on the board or something else instead? Or if we're giving some type of written work, maybe I tell you orally, what the chapter was about versus me writing it down. So being able to know what the diagnosis was helped me build the skills to advocate for myself because I was able to show people that, hey, I am like fairly smart, I am good at math and science. It's not just because I have this diagnosis doesn't make me dumb or stupid, because I can't read the test properly. I just can't read the test properly. Now, if you read it to me, sure, yeah, I can tell you what the answer was, no problem. So having those acknowledgments beforehand helped build those skills, which I wish more would know about, especially for females. We don't get told, until much later. And my ADHD was definitely diagnosed way later, but it was still kind of suspected, I guess, early with all the early resources that I was provided. So,
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes great sense. And I think so many times when I'm talking to parents and coaching, I hear, how am I supposed to tell my child that they're dyslexic or they have ADHD?
mhm,
And this just like this is a perfect story because like as long as you have the vocabulary to explain your brain,
mhm.
I see children so easily advocate for themselves when they just understand how they're different.
Oh yeah, I mean it's like if a kid says, "Oh yeah, I just have red hair," or "Oh yeah, I have an extra toe." I don't know. It's just something that it's about them versus there's not this learned societal negativity, and then later on you'll get it. But if you already have the skills built beforehand to say, "Oh, well, that's just who I am," I just need something else, it just builds the person more confidence, right? Instead of having the extra societal things on built underneath it and then adding the diagnosis.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love that, and yay for your parents for being brave enough, especially, 15 years ago, 20, whatever it was. Yeah,
Yeah, no, I it helps. I think my mom, she went to school for special education, so she knew pretty early on, like, hey, we just need to say it, and that's fine.
that's awesome. That's good. Well, I hope all the parents out there hear that and hear that story and really embrace those conversations with their children because most of the time, the children actually say back to the parents, "I already knew that."
Mhm.
Like, "Well, you're not telling me I know I'm different already, I just didn't know what the actual name for it was."
Yeah, and as long as there's good intention and there's not a negative tone towards it, it'll be a fine conversation. That's all at the end of the day it needs to be.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I would love to I know we're kind of bouncing around a little bit, but
Yeah,
hey, ADHD brains.
yeah.
So, you spent 6 plus years in college, right? Like, never mind, like, all of this school to get there.
Yeah,
What was the most challenging part of getting your degrees and your masters being dyslexic?
that's a really good question because growing up, of course, I kind of knew how to advocate for myself. Eventually, I was able to cope with strategies that I knew effectively to a certain educational level. So I never had to ask for my 504 or other things for almost a decade. I didn't use it throughout high school, throughout undergrad, and then all of a sudden I got to grad school and I'm reading really complex medical terminology, or I'm listening to it and I'm like, oh, my audiobook is not like, these words are now becoming even more mumble jumble and I'm just really not understanding. So it was tricky to relearn new strategies in a high intensity learning environment on top of that. But being able to kind of put my OT hat on early on, I was like, okay, what other ways can I do it? And I actually found some scanners. It's kind of like a pen that you scan over your paper to read the text to you, and me physically being able to put the scanner over plus hear it plus it like popped up on the computer, all those simultaneous things kind of helped the ADHD and dyslexia work all together, just to get maybe not like 100% of the words putting on the page, but at least 70%. I'm like, 70% is passing, that's fine, you know and of course it's you have to have like a higher GPA in grad school, but if you can get the main concept for what it is, you can kind of work from there and problem solve from there.
I love that. I love that you're already putting your career, like, into use before you even had the the degree itself.
Yeah, you had to, because those terminologies and textbooks are hard, and being able to take an exam, and you have ADHD and you can't move around because in the exam room, like it's a national board, so there's so many regulation strategies. Yeah, I had increased time, but you're not allowed to move around. If you move more than like a certain amount of degrees, you're asked to leave the testing center because I think you might be like talking to others. So having to actively like watch your body on top of it when you're right now crisscross applesauce, my legs on top of my chair type of thing, that's just not how my body naturally is. So being kind of extra mindful and prepping for these big things was also a big struggle.
I can't even I'm just picturing, like, I'd be so scared that I wouldn't turn
Yeah.
or that I might turn unintentionally, I don't even know if I could, like, read the question well
Mhm.
and understand it in that whole and never mind just the stress of taking a test
Mhm.
that's obviously super important to pass.
Yeah. No, I had to basically sneak a fidget into my sock so that I had something to like play with, so that instead of wiggling in my seat, I was like wiggling with my toes so that I had a fidget so that I knew that was how I could move. That's the accommodation I had to come up with. It was bizarre.
It's
Yeah.
genius. It is literally I feel like that's like the ADHD dyslexic brain at, like, a perfect work
Yeah.
right there.
Mhm. Like, I'm just using this little fidget to focus, it's fine. Did it feel odd walking into the exam room? Sure, but I passed my exam, so we're good.
So now that you're a business owner
Mhm,
and, we're both kinda going through this together, there are so many different challenging tasks every day. I feel like every day is something you're learning or trying something new.
mhm.
What's the biggest challenge for you with either dyslexia or ADHD and being a business owner?
I would say all the, like, legal paperwork type of things, and thank goodness Rachel is my co-founder because I get lost in the sauce and all the legal jargon and, oh, we have to sign this paperwork to try to get insurance for this, or you have to sign this for the IRS. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm I'm doing. So having someone that kind of is there to hold me accountable and is basically like, all right, here's the highlighted like areas. This is what we really have to worry about. This is what you can skim, has been super helpful. So kind of knowing your support system and who's better suited for like just telling you the gist of things has been extremely helpful, because my ADHD and dyslexic brain is like, I cannot go through all this paperwork and I don't have the time to like focus or the mental capacity or energy to do this. And it's not like someone has a good how to start a business for a company that doesn't like a type of company that doesn't really exist, who has a adult a neurodivergent occupational therapy company doesn't really exist. So you don't have a how to guide. So yeah, having the support system helps.
It is amazing, and we're gonna have Rachel on this season as well, so I can't wait to talk with her more as well. And you guys are you're the yin and the yang
Yeah.
to each other, which is just it's perfect seeing it all come together, and I so desperately there are days where I just wish that I had my Rachel,
Yeah.
because I'm right there with you when I have to do, like, the finance and the accounting and the legal paperwork. It is, and I I'm sure you have to do way more for the medical side, but
Mhm.
it is so daunting
Mhm.
that I can find anything else to do in the world
Oh, yeah. No,
that's more fun.
I would rather it's funny, we have recently talked about taking on insurances, and that's a huge just ball game in itself is talking to different insurance companies and are you going to be a provider and whatnot. And I've told Rachel and our recent new admin, I was like, I would rather do 10 hours of high intensity gardening and just pulling out weeds and just hurting my bones and stuff than 10 minutes of insurance stuff. So I'm just letting everyone know where my capacity is. Come at me with no more than 10 minutes of things for that because I don't have it in me. But yeah, if you have that support system or if you're able to like financially get an admin or a business coach that knows kind of the way around things, it's highly recommended because know where your strengths are and know where your time and energy needs to be spent.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that that is one of the biggest lessons is just, focus on your strengths and outsource the rest, right? Like,
Exactly.
you're not gonna make your strengths, weaker. You can only make those stronger, and you don't wanna make your weaknesses stronger too, so
I know you some people don't have like the means to do it, and obviously the first like year or two, if there wasn't Rachel, it would probably have not happened, or if it did, it would have been much later down the line. So knowing also to give yourself some grace that if you don't have those supports, that it's okay because you just need time to do them. It's not going to get done. It just might not get done when you're having XYZ on top of everything else.
That's great advice as well. I think so many times the ADHD brain just we think we can do everything, and to some extent we could
Mhm.
potentially if we didn't have anything else in life to do, but that's not reality for us either.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, just having more grace on the timelines and how much any one person can do is so important. So I love that. Great advice. What is one thing that you wish people knew about dyslexia that you don't think is maybe common knowledge?
That just because we're dyslexic doesn't mean we can't read or can't think things a little bit differently. Um, for instance, I can remember specifically being in a woodshop class back in grade school, and I was going through all the designs of this wood piece. We'd have to draw it out and map it out, basically, like if you were an architect. And for me, it was super easy. I was able to 3D think in my head exactly what this piece would be. And so I would end up being the one teaching kids like the other kids in the classroom and the other peers because no one else was understanding the concept. So you can use the way you think to your advantage and use it in just a different way.
I've had people offer to, like, read different things for me, and
Yeah.
like, "No, I can actually read."
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's great. How about ADHD? Anything that you wish the world knew about ADHD or any misconceptions that bother you?
Specifically, I think for females, is that we're here, we have ADHD. 70% of females with ADHD don't get diagnosed, or if they do, it's much later in life. So it's not the little boy in the classroom that's jumping up and down and being super disrupted that's the only one with ADHD. It might be the girl who's just fixated outside the window of the butterfly that's like going from flower to flower and isn't paying attention to the class itself, or was able to listen to the entire lecture but was still looking at that same flower, or was just so hyper focused on the teacher that she now knows the entire concept and is going to move on to the next subject. So being able to understand that it just might look differently to some people, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And it doesn't mean that that person doesn't deserve accommodations, even if they don't know what their brain is doing. The girls in the classroom that, like, because they're getting the good grades, I think it kind of becomes this societal norm that, oh, well, she's really smart and she could be, like, she's passing the classes, so what does it matter? But it doesn't mean that she's able to intake all that information to the best of her ability because maybe she can even be even smarter and understand the concept even more if you just took the time to sit down and really figure it out her brain versus just like, oh, well, she's she's passing, so it's fine.
And I think that's where it becomes really destructive as an adult because the girls that turn into women that weren't diagnosed and then motherhood hits them and life is
Mhm,
even more crazy, but
mhm.
they haven't really processed the fact that their brain is different or they don't know that their brain is different. I hear so many times women say, "I just feel crazy." And
Yeah.
it's like, No, your brain is actually wired differently. Really, really great, but different."
Mhm.
And so there's danger as a child, and then there's I think it's almost exponential when it gets into adulthood of not being diagnosed as well.
Yeah, and just it amplifies it because you're having all those executive functioning things, right? ADHD is searching for the dopamine. You have lack of dopamine in your brain and you're trying to search for it and search for it. Well, in school, you are usually focused on school and that's the thing that's giving you dopamine versus you don't have as many other responsibilities versus adulthood where you have all the responsibilities and maybe nothing gives you dopamine. So you're really like, do I feel nuts for this because I don't have the same focus as I did as a kid and I'm not able to do the things. It's no, just those things aren't giving you as much dopamine as maybe they once were, or you are only able to be like really focus on your kids for a certain amount of time because of work or whatever it might be, and you're just not meeting the needs that you need for your brain.
I think, yeah, you absolutely touched on the fact of not having enough like, it doesn't mean that you don't wanna focus on your kids. There's
Yeah,
literally a lack of dopamine, and it doesn't mean you don't love your kids. It's just
yeah,
that it doesn't give you the same dopamine hit that maybe scrolling social media or doing something else exciting would do,
mm-hmm.
but I think that there's so much mom guilt that comes with that.
Oh, absolutely. Especially when being a new mom myself, of course, I love my daughter and whatnot. And being with my daughter is giving me lots of dopamine, but I also have to work. So, yes, I'm getting a lot of dopamine from my daughter, but I still have a general lack of dopamine because I'm working 60 hours in the week. So, I'm just at a dopamine deficit. It's not that I don't love being with my daughter. Like, she does give me all this dopamine, but I'm not going to be able to fill up a huge valley that has been gone because of the lack of dopamine from other activities of my life.
Well said. Okay, so as we wrap up, I have 2 final questions. One, what is a favorite life hack of yours that you would like to share with listeners? I think so many of us do things all the time, but we don't necessarily even think of them, maybe because 'cause they're just part of our life, but I would love for you to share something that you do.
Yeah, I being a occupational therapist and neuroscience in my background, it kind of is a little nerdy for me, but I do anything that helps the vagus nerve to cool myself down. And the concept of cool yourself down literally comes from your vagus nerve and the cold parts that you do for it. So you holding onto something cold or interacting with cold items actually will bring down your nervous system a bit. So oftentimes, I don't care if it's like a metal object, I have like crystals everywhere that are just cold, anything that just is a different temperature that I can just hold on to will still kind of bring me into a different nervous system state to ground myself. So that's my little nervous system trick that I have everywhere. So if you look around, you might think I'm a little hippy dippy because I have crystals in random pockets of jackets and stuff, but it's because of the cold factor of a lot of them that it just helps regulate me when I need to regulate.
That's amazing. I have never heard that before, so I love that, and I hope our listeners love it as much. Give it a try. I'm definitely gonna give it a try now.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so final question as we kind of wrap up here.
Hmm.
If you could tell 10-year-old Stephanie some words of encouragement going through school and looking into your life, what would they be?
That it will be okay. You will show people that you're smart. You are going to be able to do the things that you want to do and need to do. And you only have to prove it to yourself and no one else. Mhm.
Awesome. Well, you are definitely doing all the things and proving 10-year-old Stephanie to be very successful, which I love. Thank
Mhm.
you so much for everything you do for the community. I know we're going to have on Rachel. We're going to talk more about what you do in the community, which is just there's just so many things that you both do, and it's amazing. And I love supporting you. Where can our listeners find Diverge Community Services? What's the best way to follow you?
You can follow us on different social medias if you want to see specifically what we're up to in the moment. Divergecommunity.com is where you can book either a consultation or see recent events that we're hosting. Otherwise, we're on TikTok for Diverge Community and then on Instagram at Diverge Community Services. So you'll see a couple things here and there, but definitely the website is where it's most recently updated. So divergecommunity.com, because otherwise you'll post TikToks from a year ago, and that's just how it is.
I was thinking about this new mom with a broken toe, and I was like, "My goodness, this is awful."
My grandmother called me last night asking the same thing. She's like, "How'd you break your toe?" I'm like, it's just an old, it's exactly a year ago from today that I broke it, and it just happened to be on this day, and I reposted it because I'm lazy and only have so much capacity. So that's why.
I love your authentic style and your transparency. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Well, thank you, Stephanie, so much. Thank you for all you do, like I said, and I'm sure our listeners will follow you. Thanks for listening. If you like this episode, I would love it if you would consider subscribing. It is literally the best way you can support our work here. And if you're feeling extra generous, take a screenshot and tag us on social with one of your takeaways from the episode. Until next time, friends, embrace that unique brain you've been given.